What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out on YouTube every single week. It took a penalty shootout, but the U.S. men's national team advances past Canada into the semifinals of the Gold Cup. Bizarre game pretty much from start to finish, with the injury to the referee right at the beginning, leading to 10 plus minutes of first half stoppage time. Brandon Vasquez looks like he's won it in the 88th minute. Canada gets the penalty to send it to extra time. Both teams score in extra time, and ultimately the U.S. prevails in a penalty shootout. Matt Turner comes up huge a couple times with saves, and the U.S. gets enough from their penalty shooters to get the job done. The story coming out of this game is the same thing I talked about on this last week, and it's the same thing I talked about 2 weeks ago. After the Jamaica game, after the group stage ended, you were going to get one helpful set of data going into this quarterfinal game, and that was against Jamaica. You were not going to learn anything valuable in those other two games. And what that Jamaica game told you was that there should be changes in the attack for that starting 11. Mihailovic should have been in. Cowell made a really strong case he should have been in. Vasquez made a really good case he should have been in. Those are the three guys that in particular stood out to me. And Christian Roldan did some good things too, but it was the other three that I thought really had strong cases. And that's only continued as this tournament has gone on. Mihailovic has been excellent. Obviously, Brandon Vasquez is coming off the bench and scoring every game. Cade Cowell came into this game and caused all kinds of issues for Canada. And that starting group, Alex Dejas and Jesus Ferreira in particular, because Mihailovic has kind of earned a starting spot at this point, it seems like. It's the same story to the Jamaica game. Didn't start particularly well. Now, they didn't fall behind like they did against Jamaica, but you didn't see all that much from the attack. It wasn't particularly inspiring. It was a little bit better in the second half. They weren't thoroughly outplayed or anything, but this is a game they should have had more control of, that shouldn't have gotten to a penalty shootout and shouldn't have, at one point, been minutes away from the U.S. losing after Jacob Schaffelberg had his goal. And you look at the way that the U.S. got back in this game. It's Vasquez, and it's, ultimately the own goal that's kind of created from a couple different players contributing. But the standout performers, aside from DeJuan Jones, who was excellent, Cowell and Vasquez. And if you're B.J. Callahan and kind of in his defense, you got a tough draw here. Because typically this game is one that you can get to experiment with a little bit too. But you got the unfortunate draw of Canada, which is why you had to be prepared coming out of that Jamaica game to have your lineup for this game. It's not that you should discredit Jesus Ferreira's hat tricks. It's that all the information you have suggests you're not going to get the same Jesus Ferreira against Canada that you got against Trinidad and Tobago. And in the against these Caribbean islands where he's scoring all these goals. And the other thing that I'm now thinking about too, to continue this Vasquez Ferreira conversation, with this set of group in particular, this set of players, you have a really creative guy, Mihailovic, who's going to take some of that kind of number 10 responsibility away from Jesus Ferreira, because that's part of what Ferreira gives you. That's why he's been a regular in this U.S. setup, is because he's not a traditional 9. He can link up. He likes to get involved. You don't necessarily need that when you have Jordy Mihailovic. The guy playing to the right of Jesus Ferreira is arguably the best crosser of the ball in MLS, in Julian Gressel. Jesus Ferreira is not winning headers. And then your left back is DeJuan Jones. You saw what DeJuan Jones could do playing in crosses. He created that first goal with his cross. You need somebody, and this was the theme of the World Cup as well, to get on the end of these chances that are getting created. And it just doesn't seem like at the highest level that guy is Jesus Ferreira. And it's a different conversation when you're talking about Ferreira versus the other guys who got opportunities in qualifying. Because I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. Those other players who got opportunities didn't take them the way that Ferreira did. That's how he ended up being the starting number 9. It's because he earned it compared to the Josh Sargents and Ricardo Pepis of the world. Whether you think he should have or not, production-wise, he did. But Brandon Vasquez was never allowed to be part of that conversation. And obviously, Florin Balogun wasn't part of that conversation. So you have to separate these groups of strikers. And based on what you've seen from Ferreira and Vasquez, I don't know what else BJ Callahan is waiting for. And there are tactical reasons to stay with Ferreira, so I at least get that a little bit. The one that I don't even get at this point even more is how Cade Cowell is not in this 11. And I think he will be for the semis. How do you keep him on the bench when you have gotten next to nothing from Alex Zendejas and Cade Cowell just comes in and causes havoc, it seems like, every time he steps on the field? Ultimately, not a great performance, not changing how you feel about this team moving forward. But they're alive. That's what matters. They won a game they should have. It wasn't pretty. Doesn't make me feel any more confident about their ability to win this tournament. To me, you still got 2 really potentially, well, you're going to have 1 tough test because you have to feel good if you're Mexico and Jamaica about how this is going. So you know you're going to get at least one really good test remaining in terms of teams that will show up on the field and feel like they're better than you. Whether they are or not, different conversation. But it's not like you're going to just coast to this title and that was your big hurdle you had to get over was Canada. There are tougher challenges remaining. And so far, this team has not stepped up to the level it needs to win this tournament. Can it get there? Sure. One of the things that's going to help with that is changing the starting 11. And this is the point where you can start having conversations about BJ Callahan and his decision-making, because it is the same story coming out of basically every single game, and specifically the 2 where you can actually really feel like you've learned something. It's the same story about the guys who are performing at the highest level for this team right now. And most of them still aren't in the starting lineup. So you have an opportunity to address that one more time. We'll see if BJ Callahan does. But it's just frustrating to feel like it's so clear and to have said this, 2 weeks ago at this point. And it took another slow start, another uninspiring performance by this group of players that Callahan seems to prefer. And granted, they weren't losing when the substitutions started getting made, and they did give up 2 goals after the substitutes came on. But if you don't have that unfortunate handball on Miles Robinson, you win this thing in normal time because of Brandon Vasquez. Again. To me, that's the story here. There's only so much you can say for this group because you can't put it in the broader context of the A team because most of these guys just aren't going to make a Copa America team or a World Cup team in 2026. So I'm focusing on what can you do to maximize this group and win this tournament. And to me, the answer is simple as that 11 needs to change. It doesn't need to be some broad, larger commentary on Brandon Vasquez versus Jesus Ferreira and their futures or anything like that, or who's even the better player. I'm not interested in that conversation. I'm interested in who is going to help this team win games right now. And that answer is Brandon Vasquez, and that answer is Cade Cowell. You saw it again in this game. Again, not pretty, not inspiring. You knew you were going to get a tough test against a Canada team that was also obviously, shorthanded and didn't have some of its most dynamic players. Matt Turner comes up big. Brandon Vasquez comes up big. You find a way to get through. Now you got to step it up to the next level if you're actually going to win this tournament. Because as I already mentioned, tougher tests ahead. But U.S. men do get through. Also want to acknowledge U.S. women win their World Cup send-off game. Trinity Rodman with a brace to keep the good vibes going heading into the World Cup 11 days from when I'm recording this. So we're less than 2 weeks away from the start of that. So no major concerns, no alarm bells ringing. U.S. women's national team takes care of business as well. So the U.S. national teams go 2 for 2. U.S. men onto the semifinals of the Gold Cup, and the women, of course, headed to the World Cup in just a few days. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.